It is said that Hayao Miyazaki, one of the greatest animators of all time, and if you haven't seen his films, you may have seen, or rather, if you've not heard of this director, this brilliant director, you will have heard of one of his plethora of films. Um, Hayao Miyazaki, from he's been behind the Spirited Away to Totoro to Princess Mononoke to Howl's Moving Castle. This man is a powerhouse. Now, this guy has been very, some would say, critical of Tolkien's work. The author behind Lord of the Rings. Now, first of all, before I delve into this, people who have watched my video know that I talk about politics. And, I talk about political analysis, current affairs, news. But this might seem random. Why am I talking about Hayao Miyazaki? And his, let's say, his critique of Tolkien, of the Lord of the Rings series. Well, it does come together. You see, Miyazaki has a very good reason as to why he is critical of Tolkien's work. And I'm a fan of both of these authors, to say the very least. I'm a big fan of Hayao Miyazaki, a big fan of the Lord of the Rings series. I even watched The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. So, quite clearly, I respect the creative imagination of both of these, behemoths, these powerhouse titans of entertainment, of script writing, of storytelling. But Miyazaki has a good point when he critiques Tolkien. You see, Tolkien has a very Western view of storytelling and fantasy storytelling, in that he talks about good and evil being as intrinsic qualities of a person. So what I mean by this is that in the Lord of the Rings you got the orcs, for example, who are innately evil, and so and you have the elves, or you have got humans and elves who are more innately good, but they have the choice to make good or bad, but they generally they have the potential to be good, whereas orcs are innately evil. And this kind of polarized way of looking at the world is the kind of the foundation and the the divergence from Hayao Miyazaki. Now, Hayao Miyazaki is somebody who does storytelling in a way which is based on compassion, empathy, but also the truth. Because there is no intrinsic evil. I mean, if the only reason one would consider the possibility that there is intrinsic evil is that you believe in some supernatural force, or you misunderstand why evil things happen in the world. But the moment you start talking about species, subspecies, races, or types of people being innately evil, is the moment you kind of like you start creating a monolith. And this is kind of the morality of an ignorant person. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And so, whilst I really much enjoy, incredibly, I love Lord of the Rings. I've seen it like it must have been 8 times already, and I'm going to watch it more in the future. But when it applies to the real world, it doesn't leave a lot of scope for actual application of morality in the real world, because in the real world you have to deal with people with differing views and people whose actions you may deem as evil, but these people are not innately evil, because the moment you start saying that these people are innately evil, then you start looking at the whole ethnicity as the cause of why they're being evil. There's no way to, there's no bones about, and there's no other way to explain it. You can start talking about ideas and ideologies as being evil, but when it comes to the intrinsic qualities of a person, quite clearly, Tolkien has a kind of more polarized view of it. Now, obviously there's more nuance here, because Tolkien does show that humanity, human beings like you and I, we have the ability to go, on the path of good or evil. And these are exemplified by the actions, by the choices that people make. But in that, obviously that is something that is more reflective of Hayao Miyazaki's view of good and evil. But the moment this all sits in Tolkien's worldview, it sits with a much larger scope why people become evil, because why human beings become evil, because they're influenced by the evil forces out there. And so the broader scope here is missing from Tolkien's work, which Hayao Miyazaki, who was brought up in a post nuclear bombed Japan, and therefore had been a lifelong pacifist, understands that the problem of this kind of essentialized view of seeing people as intrinsically evil, and he himself, I believe, erroneously thought that the orcs were just a caricature of Japanese people, which I don't think is the case. In fact, in Lord of the Rings, in the kind of much larger scope of the Lord of the Rings world, the kind of universe, there are Asians and Africans that are part of the humankind, but even in that circumstance, in Tolkien's storytelling, these people have turned to the dark side, and so it makes one think, or makes one cause one to conclude that Tolkien's worldview is based on a more Western supremacist worldview, and that's another point against the work of Tolkien. Now, that's not to say, of course, that I have an issue with that, because of course he's a product of his time, but it also creates an essentialized view of African and Asian people. There's no way to sugarcoat it. We don't need to sugarcoat his work. We can appreciate that both of these creators, both Tolkien and Hayao Miyazaki, have very good, strong overlapping themes which we must take home with us. For example, an appreciation and a respect and a reverence of nature, which Miyazaki obviously shows in nearly all of his films, a respect for the connection with nature. For example, in Princess Mononoke, how and it also taking into consideration his view of morality, and then that you had these band of humans in their armies conquering the whole forests, and even slaying the forest spirit in order to acquire more resources from nature. Even these people, the army leaders and the people at the front lines, the strategists of these bands of human beings taking over the natural world, even they themselves had a side of them that was deeply human, deeply, even possibly considerably compassionate. And that's the case in reality. And this is the reason why it's not possible to be a progressive or a leftist, or even a truly liberationist, somebody who believes in truly free Palestine, and also be a racist against be anti-Semitic. You cannot be anti-Semitic and truly be a freedom, a liberation, humanitarian, because just look at people like Gabor Mate. Look at Norman Finkelstein. Look at these people of Jewish background who are some of the most vociferous, most prolific, most powerful voices for the pro-Palestine movement, because there's no intrinsic quality of an individual, of groups of people, ethnicities or races or subcultures, whatever you call them, that cause them to act in moral ways. There's an intrinsic quality to each individual person, and we must be and analyze the actions of people based on their individual basis for doing so. And of course, as how people liberate themselves is by coming together in bands of people. But in the end, it's the individuals coming together for a collective cause because it benefits them as well. That's to say, Miyazaki has a more, more, let's say, more progressive, more true to reality, true to life way of looking at how morality, how reality, how we view others matters. I think I think he has his criticism of Tolkien is courageous in a way, because in this world where we are, when you have a person who becomes a you know household name, they become a staple of culture, they become so revered, they become so impossibly too big to fail, too big to be criticized. It takes a bit of courage to critique them in a way that really gets to the core message, and something that might actually have people just brush you off as as somebody who is jealous, or but this is not the case for Miyazaki. He actually has a very strong and important point. And maybe perhaps the reason why Tolkien is the way that he thinks is because he was also a product of World War Two, and he fought he was part of the army that fought Germans, and so. And yet, despite that, he doesn't see the Germans in an intrinsically an evil way, um, which, which which means that he has a more Eurocentric, Euro supremacist worldview, and but sees Asians and Africans, or the Chinese and Africans, and Japanese and Africans, as somewhat slightly, they're not the pure. This is a conjecture, and maybe he didn't actually come to that conclusion, but one has to be careful about how morality is used and what we can extract from media. And there is no such thing as media that is so sacred, so above a criticism, that we must veer away from it. So these are my my 2 cents on my political analysis of these two juggernauts of cinema, of creativity, of fantasy. And I believe that whilst these are two truly, they had a good head on their shoulders when it comes to morality, I do understand Hayao Miyazaki's point of view with regards to Tolkien. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.